What's going on, everyone? You're listening to the Monday Post Press Conference Recap, sponsored by the Ranch Harley-Davidson in College Station. I'm Alex Miller with Eagle, joined always by Travis Brown. We're inside Kyle Field. Just heard from Jimbo Fisher and a few A&M football players ahead of their game against Arkansas this weekend at AT&T Stadium. Travis, A&M coming off a big win over Miami on Saturday. What were some of the key things Jimbo had to say looking back at that game in particular?
Yeah, I think the one thing that stood out to me the most is for several reasons is kind of one small quote when Jimbo was talking about what he saw from the offense after going through film, and that was, I know it doesn't look like it, but we're close. As in, they're close to finding that execution. It's just one little tweak here or there that will turn some of those plays into either successes that weren't successes or bigger plays in the future. We'll have to see how that necessarily pans out. But I think that there's two things to that. One, I think Jimbo knows and feels that the kind of pressure that's on him in the offense to be successful, because that's what that first part is. I know it doesn't seem like it. And then the second part is that there are developments being made and things moving forward with that offense. A lot of talk about Max Johnson. Said that he had a lot of poise and was able to run the offense pretty well. So there was a few times where the decisions weren't necessarily quite right or quite there, but he liked where he was moving forward on that. Another interesting part about that too is the fact that got a little bit into their recruitment of Max Johnson, and their recruitment of Max Johnson was a little bit less of them and more of him. Jimbo and Brad Johnson, Max Johnson's dad, have known each other for a long time, and when he was going to put his name, or when he did put his name in the transfer portal, they reached out to A&M and Jimbo to see if they would be interested, and they said, hey, you know what? I think we would be. So a little bit of an interesting dynamic there with that.
Yeah, something that Jimbo noted about the offensive line in particular was that they got better as the game went on against Miami. Noted how, some running lanes started to open up, and I think that's something what we did notice. I don't think A&M ran the ball as well as they probably hoped, but certainly looked better than they did against App State, even against Sam Houston.
Especially that right side of the line, the Layden Robinson, Reuben Fothery side, that seemed to be a side that really opened up some pathways for him.
Yeah, and then I think we had some injury updates too.
Sure. Andre White will not be available. He was injured, of course, in that Sam Houston State game, the first game of the season. He will not be back at practice this week. Jimbo Fisher did say that Antonio Johnson and Walter Nolan will be back. Of course, Walter Nolan didn't play in the game last Saturday. He's seen, some rotational time there at defensive tackle. Antonio Johnson, they're all-purpose, all-around, probably best defender back there in the defensive secondary. He got hurt late in the game on Saturday and didn't come back into the game, but Jimbo Fisher said he should be back ready to play this week against Arkansas. And I'll interject something that stood out to me as well. We had a little kicker talk today because, Of course, Randy Bond was run out there to kick the field goal instead of Caden Davis. And Jimbo said, as of right now, Randy Bond is their guy, but said that kind of the same disclaimers to everything, that the competition is always open week to week, and that he could see a scenario where if they needed a really long field goal, Caden Davis has more range, they could run him back out for that.
Especially in a stadium like AT&T where, no wind, a little easier to kick off that turf, so could see that maybe at the end of the half if A&M's in that kind of position. Heard from a few players today, heard from Albert Regis, I think for the first time,
Sure.
First time we talked with him, Jimbo had to mention how he was a running back and a tight end out of high school. What were some of the things that really stood out of what Albert had to share?
Well, we asked him why he decided to come to A&M, and that was actually really fascinating. He said he had an uncle and his older brother who are both really big A&M fans. Both of them have actually since passed, and so he thought that coming here to A&M would kind of be living on their legacy and their fandom, getting to suit up for the Aggies. So that was an interesting part of it. And then talking a little bit, it was funny. He said he had the wherewithal after he blocked that kick to think, okay, I don't know if the ball passed the line of scrimmage. I'm going to find the ball first to see if we can advance it. And once he realized he wasn't, the next thing he thought about is, shoot, I got to celebrate. And then he said he unlocked his inner defensive back to give like a no good and put his arms in the air. And so that was a pretty fun, really great conversation with him. Seemed like a really smart kid. And had a lot to say about that defensive line trying to get that little bit more push against the run block against all their opponents this year.
Guy that's waited his turn, got his first career start last week. I think it's his third year in the program, so had a big game last week against Miami. Some other personnel notes. Jimbo said the 4 freshmen that were suspended last week against Miami, Evan Stewart, Chris Marshall, Denver Harris, Smoke Bowie, they'll all be back against Miami. Anaya Smith had something to say about just kind of, what went when all that went down, how some of those leadership players were informed on some of that.
Sure. He said that once they all kind of realized what had happened and a team rule had been violated, Fisher and the coaching staff brought their leadership group in to have a conversation to let them know kind of what was going on and be involved with that or hear the decision-making process of what would happen going forward with that. And Anaya Smith said he pulled some of those guys aside and had conversations with them as the leader of that group. Of course, 2 of them were Evan Stewart and Chris Marshall, 2 wide receivers, being the leader of that group to kind of talk through making some better decisions moving forward.
2 more quick things. One, Jimbo, a lot of high praise for Arkansas. Said they're a very veteran team. Think we knew that coming in. Said Bumper Pool, it seems like he's been playing there forever. I think he's my age, maybe. I don't know. I'm like 24. But, certainly had some high remarks for the Razorbacks and what Sam Pittman's been able to do pretty quickly there.
Yeah, they're going to be a physical team. They've been running the ball really well. And then KJ Jefferson is a quarterback that Jimbo Fisher has always praised a lot. Big, strong, powerful guy is what he said about him. Can run a really good offense, manage the offense really well. On defense, again, another physical defense. They actually even have another linebacker, and I can't remember his name now. Drew Sanders, that transferred in, who's actually kind of been the standout for them defensively, especially. And I know Jalen Catalon was a guy who played defensive back, but he was one of their big thumpers, big hitter as well, and he's out for the season. So it'll be interesting to see how A&M can run it against that defensive front. But I'm sure that's something we'll get into later this week.
Yes. One more thing, Jimbo, when he there's some mixed opinions on A&M Arkansas playing at AT&T Stadium, whether people like it or not. Jimbo said he actually likes playing up there, which I found a little interesting.
The first, for the players, it's fun because you get to play in an NFL stadium. I know there's everything great about Kyle Field and the allure that it has, but, if you play a sport and you grow up and you watch the pros, like you want to be like a pro, and that's a good chance to do that. He's also mentioned in the past that it really does in some way simulate a bowl game, that neutral site kind of venue, and gets them prepared for that when those opportunities do come. But it's also a moot point at this point because we already know from both ADs that after the contract's up in 2024 that these are going to go back to the campuses, at least for that short time being moving forward. So, yeah, there's pluses. I know the fans are not super thrilled about it all the time because, everyone wants to be here at Kyle Field and everyone wants to go and experience the other venues as well, including up there in Fayetteville. But yeah, I think that there's positives for both teams, and I think that when they played here in 2020,
right?
And it was a pretty exciting game. But I think there is something about that neutral site, having both fan bases there in pretty good force, and being in that NFL stadium that just brings that little bit extra out of both teams, because that's always one of those games that no matter what the rankings are, what the records are, it's a rivalry game, and it brings a little bit more out of them. And I think AT&T Stadium has played a little bit of a part in that.
Well, we'll be there this Saturday at AT&T Stadium, but until then, please check theeagle.com for all of our coverage leading up to A&M's big game against the Razorbacks. For Travis Brown, I'm Alex Miller. We'll see you next time.